Chapter 13. Like Rats. All night I listened to Allied bombers blast the countryside. As sirens shrilled, I prayed that Luca would be safe. When I finally got to sleep, I dreamed that bombs were everywhere. The bombs lined up for soup in the canteen with me, and they lay down in the bunk beside me. There were so many bombs in the air that the sky looked gray. I dreamed of Larissa, her arms holding a bomb like it was a baby. I woke up weeping. When we got to our work area the next day, our wooden rack of bombs had been emptied. I figured that removing them must be a job for someone on the night shift. I watched my own hands measure out explosives and carefully filled the nose of each bomb, making sure there wasn't a grain too much gunpowder or too little. Acutely aware of the man behind the glass. It was almost as if those hands didn't belong to me. The third day was the same as the first and the second, but the monotony of building bombs did not relieve the terror. Each night I tossed and turned, wondering about who would be dead because of me. I didn't think it would ever happen, but after a few weeks, we all somehow did get used to making bombs, and we breathed easier as time passed and our building was not hit. The aerial camouflage seemed to be working. We 6 did not talk about our work at lunchtime or on the train ride back. We looked forward to our moments of privacy, like those few minutes in our barracks while the others were washing up. Sometimes on a Saturday afternoon or on Sunday, we were able to gather together as well. But during those times, Natalia was gone, working for hire. But since she would come back with tidbits of information as well as food for us, it became a Sunday night ritual for the 6 of us to gather together inside the wash house just before curfew. On the last Sunday in October, Natalia looked especially pleased with herself as she stepped into the wash house. She sat down on the edge of the trough, and we gathered around her in anticipation. "You will never believe what I managed to get this time," she said, her eyes shining. She reached into an inconspicuous pocket in the depths of her threadbare dress, pulled out a small flat package, and folded back the paper. "Brown sugar." Curling the paper into a cone, she said, "Hold out your hand." She took out a small pyramid of brown sugar on my palm. I licked it up, reveling in the burst of sweetness. When was the last time I had eaten anything so good? Not in the years of Soviet rule, and certainly not since the Nazis had come. All at once I remembered my last bit of sweetness. That Nazi woman dressed in brown who gave Larissa and me candies in exchange for information. I swallowed down the sugar that coated my tongue, but the memory hung there. Had I not taken those candies, maybe Larissa and I would be safe. And my own grandmother, was she dead because of me? My eyes filled with tears. I blinked hard, trying to erase the disturbing images. I looked over to Xenia. She held her hands in front of her face, palm up. "This reminds me of the gunpowder we use in the bombs," she said. Katerina had licked every last speck of sugar from her own palm. She stared at Xenia's grains. This brown sugar is the wrong texture, and it's not dark enough," Katerina said. "I think the dirt outside this wash house looks more like the gunpowder." Gunpowder, grains that looked like the explosives, but weren't. "What would—" Natalia began, then stopped. We all looked at her. "What would happen if we put some dirt into the bombs?" said Natalia. My heart nearly stopped beating. What a bold thought. "They wouldn't work so well, is my guess," said Xenia. She still hadn't eaten the sugar on her palm. "How would we sneak it in?" said Katerina. "The same way I brought in the sugar," said Natalia. "In our pockets." We looked at each other solemnly. Could it work? Would we be caught? It was hard to know. Was it worth the chance? Definitely. Katerina looked at Natalia, her eyes alight with a new idea. If I ease up on the hammer machine early, she said, I think the bombs would fail to snap together all the way. They might fall apart instead of exploding. There were lots of ways to ruin the bomb, I said. But we are being watched, always watched. As fall turned toward winter, we noticed subtle changes all around. Bombs had been falling all day and night for months, but now the sky was black with Allied bomber planes. We heard that entire German cities had been destroyed. At the work camp, some of the policemen hung up their uniforms and left. The ones who stayed became even crueler than they had ever been before. It was like their war losses were our fault. Once, when Officer Schmidt was annoyed by a prisoner's answer at roll call, he cocked his gun and shot the man on the spot. We were all afraid to breathe. On our way to and from the city, I would look out the window and try to make sense of what I saw. Waves of ragged refugees walked through the city streets. Some were starving like us, but others looked like they had recently been well fed. The few Germans who still rode on the train with us would whisper among themselves, and I would try to listen to find out what was going on. From what I could hear, the Soviets were pushing the Nazis back. As the battleground moved closer to us, whole villages and towns were being destroyed. People who survived fled west, away from the fighting, but farther into Nazi territory. One icy evening in November, when I stepped off the train after work, Julie met me. Her eyes rimmed with red. I have something for you, she said. Come quickly. She grabbed me by the hand and pulled me along to her barrack. We stepped inside. It was empty, save for us. She knelt in front of her bed, which was a bottom bunk close to the heater at the back, reached under the bed, and drew out a pair of worn leather shoes that were made for a woman. Put these on, and let's get out of here before anyone else comes in. Shoes were like gold in the camp. Where had Julie gotten these? I didn't stop to think about it, but slipped my feet inside. They were roomy, but I didn't mind. My feet were swollen, and the shoes felt warm and solid. I followed Julie out the door, stepping gingerly, trying to reteach myself how to walk in shoes. I noticed a truck idling by the entrance of the hospital. What is that truck for? Julie's eyes filled with tears. Don't go there. But of course I did. The back of the truck was stacked with the gaunt bodies of dead slaves, many with faces frozen in painful contortions. I recognized one as a woman who had replaced me, helping Amy in the laundry. She was barefoot. I looked down at my feet and knew where the shoes had come from. My heart felt like it could burst with guilt. Here I was benefiting from someone else's death. Better you have the shoes than they get buried, Julie murmured. I said a silent prayer for the woman whose shoes I wore, then looked at the others in the truck. They were mostly strangers. Where had these people come from, and why? Why were they all dead? What happened? I asked Julie. The Nazis are retreating in the east, and camps there are being overrun by the Soviets. She nodded back toward the truck. The Nazis shipped those prisoners away from a work camp just before it was liberated by the Soviets. The prisoners arrived on a train this morning, starving and nearly frozen. Officer Schmidt decided that they wouldn't be useful workers, and he didn't want to waste food on them. He ordered the cook to put poison in today's Russian soup. She blinked back tears. All of the Eastern workers who were in the camp today have died. Even though my stomach was empty, bile rose in my throat. Should I have been thankful that my friends and I had our soup at the factory instead of the camp? Should I have been thankful for my shoes? It was by mere chance that I wasn't one of those corpses on the back of the truck. I had heard about these mass poisonings before, but it seemed so impossible, even for the Nazis. I thought it was a rumor, said Julie, brushing away a tear from the back of her hand. I've been told that is why the Russian soup always has a separate ladle. I looked down at my new shoes and then back toward the truck. The Nazis will pay for this, I vowed to Julie. They should think twice before asking slaves to make bombs.